is a user experience advocate in GNOME, and also he is the coordinator of Mozilla Philippine community. And Caeg, today he will give us a talk. It's more about his experience in GNOME and what the user experience developed in GNOME can shed us a light of how applications will be in the future. And let's welcome him. And also, usually we have 25 minutes for a talk and 5 minutes for QA. This talk will be in English. 那 Allan Caeg 他是从菲律宾来的，然后他是菲律宾的那个 Mozilla Community 的负责人。如果大家知道，就比较像是 Bob 在台湾的状况。然后他同时也是 GNOME User Experience 的成员。那今天来他会跟我们讲一些他在 GNOME 上面的经验。然后我们有25分钟的时间，那大概5分钟的时间是问答。那请大家拍手欢迎一下。It doesn't. Oh, we have some problems, so please wait a moment.
I'll just export it to PDF.
What do you see now is GNOME Shell, the latest one.
Mic test. Okay, first of all, ni hao. Okay, so my topic is about exploring new paradigms of computing for GNOME desktop environment. So I'm Allan Caeg. I'm a UX designer from the Philippines. And the objectives of this presentation is to explore new ways to develop the user experience of the free desktop. And it's to take advantage of the current development state of the GNOME desktop, because we're currently approaching GNOME 3.0. And there's a lot more. And I also want to solicit ideas and support from you to build on these presentations' recommendations so we can make something really awesome for GNOME. So the sections of this presentation include the first one, it's the idea of a paradigm. Second one, how GNOME is facing the current challenges for computing. Computing as in for the use of your computers. Exploring new paradigms would be the final section. So first of all, let me introduce to you the idea of a paradigm. So we're on the same page. So what's a paradigm? I took this one from Stephen Covey's book, and it said, the word paradigm stems from the Greek word paradigma, originally a scientific term, but commonly used today to mean a perception, assumption, theory, frame of reference, or lens through which you view the world. It's the way how things work. It's the high-level idea. So the specifics really depend on the paradigm. So why are we working on the paradigm? We can work on the development of specific stuff instead, right? We can work on GNOME Shell. We can work on nice little apps, but if you want to make significant quantum improvement, work on paradigms. So we want significant improvement for the desktop, and we believe that the free desktop has this potential. So how GNOME is facing computing challenges? We go to the second section of this presentation. I believe that there are two compelling computing challenges today. The first one is the increasing number of computing distractions. When you're on your computer, there are so many things that will hinder you from focusing on the things that you should be spending your time on. There will be an IM, there will be a Facebook message, and so many other things. And they all want to notify you, so you'll pay attention to their services. The second one is the need to focus on and speed up productive work. We need to do the right things on our computers. That's what they are here for us. GNOME 3. For the GNOME 3.0 specifically, we have the shell. And it revolutionizes the computing experience. As discussed earlier, it has a new concept of applications. When you go to your desktop, it now determines that a certain window belongs to a certain application. It can differentiate a Firefox window from a window of another application. And we have now the activities overview, the thing that you see whenever you hit the upper left corner of the desktop. It's not rendering properly, probably because of the big screen. So we also have a new notification system, which aims to be unobtrusive. Exploring new paradigms. This is the most important part of this presentation. The rise of mobile devices. People love mobile platforms. There's a reason why there's so much attention going to the iPad, the iPhone, the Android, and many other emerging mobile platforms like the Google Chrome OS. And Steve Jobs also said that PCs are going to be like trucks. This is arguable, but what he simply meant by that statement is the mobile devices would work so well that most people are going to replace their big computers with the mobile devices. Whether or not this is going to happen, there's a reason for us to believe that the mobile world is doing something right. And we can learn from them. Okay, one paradigm that I have learned from the iPad is the application-centric paradigm. I was compelled by this idea when I read Matt Assay's article. It's entitled, "The Application is the New Operating System." He said that we should focus on the user. We should spend less time on things like navigating through the complicated file system and focus on the things that delight our average users and not just the developers, so they can focus on actual work that they want to achieve, that they want to focus on. He suggests that we should try to revolutionize our ways by getting rid of the requirement of having to go through the file system and other remnants of the bygone era. So to create a more app-centric environment, we at the GNOME usability team discussed this issue, and Allan Day, a member of the community, proposed a document manager. Maybe we need an application that will manage our documents so we won't have to go through the file system every single time, so that average users will have a more pleasurable experience. And GNOME Shell is now addressing the need for application centrism by introducing the concept of applications and not just Windows. Because GNOME 2 is just an environment where you put so many windows. They're not really classified. It's up to the user to think of what each window does. You put it there and then you see for yourself how they work together. Okay, so here's an even more compelling paradigm of computing. It's called the context-centric paradigm. I was introduced to this idea when the Windows Phone 7 was announced. It had the idea of hubs: the People Hub, Pictures Hub, Games Hub, Music and Video, Marketplace, and Office. So what do? You go to that specific hub. So when you're in a particular disposition, for example, the People Hub, you're in a social disposition. You get the momentum to interact with people. And if you go to the Office Hub, you get the momentum to do productive things that are related to your work. Because people are hardwired to focus on just one thing at a time. We're good at multitasking, but it decreases our chance of doing something with excellence. I also encountered David Allan's Getting Things Done. It's a productivity tool. And he introduced the idea of context. He said that a few actions can be done anywhere, but most require a specific location or having some productivity tool, such as a phone or computer. There are things that we can do only when we're in a particular context. Like, for example, you have something to do with your mother or father. You can only do that when you can communicate with them. Or you have something to do with communicating with other people, so you stay in the context where you can access your email. Or if it's for work, you stay in the Office Hub. So you won't have to switch your attention very constantly, because that takes time, effort, and that destroys your momentum. This may also reduce the cognitive load or the use of psychic RAM. Psychic RAM is we are familiar with the idea of a RAM on the computer. It stores things that we have at a time that we should remember at a particular moment. And people have a psychic RAM, and we can only remember so much at a particular moment. With so much data in our minds, we may forget so much important things. And awareness of context. Because if we're in a particular context, we can define that we spent most of our time by doing productive work, or we can say that we spent most of our time playing games or talking to other people. When I discussed this idea with Brian Cameron, we had some interesting ideas that we built on top of my initial proposals. It's the ubiquitous context-centric computing. Sounds big, huh? But it's not that complicated. I'm going to try to explain it very clearly. On your desktop, if we can define contexts like Office contexts, when you connect a peripheral that can also do Office stuff, or for example, social stuff, your phone is meant to call. So it would be nice if your desktop computer also defines the context of your peripheral devices. Imagine if your phone can communicate with your PC so that your PC knows that you're spending your time by calling on your phone. That way, your PC will know if it can notify you or not. They're integrated, and it knows what context you are spending your time and effort on. We can also take advantages of technologies of mobile devices like GPS, accelerometer, RFID, etc. What it means is, if our mobile devices are integrated with our desktop computers, our computers would know if we are away from the keyboard. If we stand up and the accelerometer detects the movement, it will tell your computer that you're away from your keyboard, so that your contacts on your IM applications will know that you won't get the message if they IM you on your computer. Or we can also take advantage of RFIDs, etc., but that's going to be for the future. We're going to have to explore our resources. And what's more interesting is the potential of integrating with non-electronic devices. Imagine if your desktop computer can integrate with the stuff that you interact with that are non-electronic. So for example, I'm talking now, and my computer has a way of knowing that I'm far from it and that I'm holding a mic. So it will be intelligent enough to give me what I need. And that could be done with the help of my mobile device that I have in my pocket. It told me that I'm far enough from my computer so that it knows that I can touch it at this moment. So ideas to make context-centrism happen in GNOME. First of all, we have to make GNOME more scalable so that it's going to be more cross-platform, with greater availability in many kinds of platforms of mobile devices. We can make our computing experience more tightly integrated across different devices. The second is the utilization of the multiple workspaces. Right now, free desktops have the ability of having multiple workspaces, and on GNOME Shell, you can add or remove one anytime, as long as the minimum is you have one workspace. And we can advantage of that by defining the context on each workspace. For example, you created one workspace and you label it Office. That way, you will remember that your OpenOffice.org document or your other apps are in that specific workspace. That way, you won't have to put it in your mind because it's easily recognizable. You won't have to remember. It's based on your instinct, and it doesn't take your memory. And we also have application categories as of the moment, so we can also maximize the use of this. By using the application categories, we can tell if a certain application is for the web, for the office, if it's a game, or whatever. We can utilize those technologies to define what context we are on. And we can also tag applications, windows, and other elements on the desktop if it's not intelligent enough to tell automatically. What are the challenges? First of all, we need to define web apps. Some people are very web apps dependent. For example, I have so many Firefox windows. If I want the context to be defined, I want my Firefox window to know that that one of its tabs or one of its windows is for Office because it's a Google Docs window or it's a Google Calendar window. And we also want our, for example, Facebook tab or video to be tagged as social window. Right now, it's challenging because all of them are tagged as internet windows because they're all parts of the web browser. And if we're going to introduce new things, this is going to be big. It's to be fit with the user's established habits and expectations. Whether we like it or not, we already have existing expectations of how the desktop computer would work. So even if we introduce nice ideas, if people won't receive them very well, it's hard to build on them. And finally, my recommendations. First of all, let's not forget the challenges. There are feasibility challenges and user experience ones. It's nice to make something revolutionary, but if it really doesn't work, we shouldn't force it. Second one, assess the application and context-centric paradigms. Do they actually make sense? In theory, they could, but we should also do some testing to make sure that they would actually work in real life. The third one is to explore ubiquitous computing. That is, integrating with other devices. Your desktop integrates with your mobile devices and even does probably augmented reality with the use of maybe projectors, sensors, RFIDs, GPS, and other technologies. And lastly, think of ways to introduce these ideas to GNOME and maybe fit them in the roadmap if they actually do make sense. So there, you have comments or suggestions? Anyone?
Question?
Also, feel free to email me. Okay.
Okay, so you're talking about trying to recognize what the program is doing, whether it's a web app or something else. Do you plan to do that with or without the collaboration from the applications themselves?
We haven't explored that yet, but that would make sense. Right now, all we have would be the tag of applications, whether an application belongs to Office or whatever. And a future challenge would be if we want really ubiquitous computing and integration with mobile devices, those applications would also need tags. So your mobile devices, for example, your phone, it has to be a social tag or maybe a special one, which means you can't be distracted while using the phone. So
okay.
There's going to be a lot of upstream work, if ever.
So you're talking about asking all the developers to follow a specific tagging protocol.
We can explore that. If there's a way to not have to do that, so things will be smoother, of course that idea is also very much welcome.
Well, I can see two difficulties there. In the first scheme where you require collaboration from all the developers, they're probably not going to do it for you, right? And the second one is if there's a way to not have to require that and you can do it in GNOME itself, trying to recognize what each program is doing, then in theoretical computer science, there's this thing called undecidability. I can prove that you cannot do that. Okay.
You mean the automatic tags?
Right.
Yep. That's why I also mentioned that the user also can tag. And the user may also have special preferences. The user may also define special contexts that only works for him. And it's really worth exploring that maybe each person may have different types of contexts. So that way, when you have an app, maybe if it's already executed, this idea, the user has a choice to tag applications so that they can be grouped in different ways, like grouped on GNOME Shell, grouped on the alt-tabbing feature, the Windows switcher, or grouped by desktop, or maybe simple things like color coding the window border, just to reduce cognitive load so that the user can easily recognize what context he's working on.
Right, I would agree that letting the user help you will be the best way to go.
Yep.
Yeah. So a second question is, earlier you talked about application-centric paradigm, where someone said the need to, what's it called?
Document manager.
For a document manager that would reduce the need to access the file system. That's a little vague to me. The document manager, how is that different from, say, Apple's Finder from 30 years ago?
Sorry?
Apple's Finder started in Lisa, later on Macintosh. You click on a document instead of typing a command, right? It went the other way. Before that, computers always operate by typing a command first, then the file being processed by that command. And in that design, you put the center on the document, right? You double-click on the document, it launches. The file manager is called the Finder because it finds the necessary application for you. So the document manager you're talking about there, how is it different from this 30-year-old design?
We don't have to do something different. We just have to bring things that don't exist to the GNOME desktop yet. So if it doesn't exist on the GNOME desktop yet, we may be in the need for something like Finder.
Okay, thank you.
We don't need to make innovations just for the sake of it. We're
Okay.
just here to make things easy.
My apologies. I didn't know it didn't exist in GNOME yet.
Anything else?
Any question asked? Okay, so thanks, Allan.
Feel free to contact me, Allan@gmail.com.